Good evening to one and all gathered here. Special Center for Tamil Studies, JNU University. Cordially welcome you all to the today's session. I would like to invite Professor Damodaran from Special Center for Tamil Studies to deliver a welcome address.
Good evening to everybody. Welcome. Only for boss working community, he contributed mainly only one line I mentioned it. Strongly report Tamil tradition different from Sanskrit tradition. That is contributed to Tamil. Thank you.
I would like to invite Dr. Chandrasekharan from Special Center for Tamil Studies to honor our chief guest with small amount.
This is the second dimension.
Thank you. I would like to invite Mr. Kamal Kanan to deliver a case speaker.
Members, we are conversation and members and other students from various schools and centers of our Jawaharlal University. On behalf of Special Center for Tamil Studies, now I would like to introduce about our chief guest, Dr. Tatiana Dubyanskaya. Dr. Tatiana Dubyanskaya is currently teaching Hindi at SCTS University at Moscow, Russia. She has done 2 research projects in our university, so I think we could definitely call her as an alumna of our Jawaharlal University. Her father, he was an eminent scholar. I'm sorry to say, he was no more, unfortunately, but he was an eminent Russian Tamil scholar. He has contributed a lot. One of his books, Ritual and Mythological Sources of Ancient Tamil. I have translated that work. So just now, our Honorable Vice Chancellor has released the advanced copy of that work. Dr. Tatiana, I'm going to deliver share her experience about contemporary Indian literary studies in Russia. Other than Hindi, she knows Bengali, Polish, and German languages. She is an eminent scholar. Thank you for accepting our invitation. I kindly request you to deliver your lecture.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Dear Professor Damodaran, dear Professor Shivashankaran, Professor Bandipadzhai, dear friends and colleagues, can you hear me well? Or
Yes.
It's yeah. Okay, yeah.
I would like to invite Professor Shobha Surashankaran, Dean School of Language and Literature, to deliver the case.
Dr. Tatiana Dubyanskaya.
That's okay.
Sorry.
Tatiana is fine.
I warmly welcome you to the Special Center for Tamil Studies.
Thank you very much.
And we are honored to have you here. I hear that you're going to talk about contemporary Indian literary studies in Russia. This is an area of interest for many of us. And we have also our colleagues from the Center for Russian Studies.
Yes. It's a great joy for me that you're there.
So, I'm sure it is going to benefit the Tamil. Maybe there are some references to Tamil and what you're going
I
to
could
speak.
try, yeah.
And you are a professor of Hindi, yes?
Yes, I teach Hindi in the literature.
Yes. And I hear that you are an alumnus of Harvard University.
Yeah, I was on study tours here and research exchange programs.
Okay. So this will be a mutual it's 3 to 5 years.
Yes, I hope very
And
much so.
we hope to benefit largely from what you're going to speak. And I'm sure it will open up new venues for research, even for us within the school. This is, and perhaps you would make references to whatever your father has proposed, because as Professor Damodaran just said, your father pointed out that the tradition, Tamil tradition, is very different from the Sanskrit tradition. That is his biggest contribution. That's what I learned. So it'll be very interesting if you're able to throw some light on that as well, if possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting and having me here. Thank you.
So all the best to you, and let us move on to your speech.
Yes, yes. So I greet everyone in this wonderful university, which occupies a very special place in my heart, as I said, because I spent a few months researching here. That was a long time ago. That was in 2004 and then 2007. But when I happened to live in Delhi for a couple of years, I always stayed near JNU campus, so that was a place where I was visiting all the time for different functions in School of Languages and Literatures and in other places in this university. So that's a great honor for me to be here and a great joy, because I love coming to this campus. I am very happy that the Special Center for Tamil Studies now is growing and is doing great work, and special thanks to colleagues who are pushing this Tamil studies forward, because although I myself never really learned Tamil apart from a few words, you can understand that it really occupies a very big place in my heart. I love the sound of the language, and I probably will learn it someday too, because as a person who in a way inherited my father's deals after his passing away, naturally I have to take care about after a number of projects, publications which could not happen. These all are my responsibilities, and I have to say I am not being able to really deliver, because there are a number of projects which are still hindering behind, and I have to really push them forward in 2024. So you can wish me good luck in that. So I really feel that it's my responsibility also to deal with South Indian studies and with Tamil studies in a way. Once again, thank you very much for this invitation. It's a great honor. I absolutely don't deserve it. And I also would like to share my words of condolences in connection with the cyclone that hit South India. I'm very sorry to know about the victims of this, and I hope for their relief, which comes soon. So my task here is to share a few things from our perspective, how we see Indic studies in modern Russia. I very much hope for questions on your part, on part of my dear Slavists who are here, because we always believed that as Indologists in Russia and as Russian scholars in India, we really are doing mutual work, and we have to connect. We have always tried to connect, and we're successful. So this is the field which we understand each other, because in a way we mirror each other's problems. So this is the field where all philologists will understand, philologists dealing with foreign languages, with foreign cultures, will understand each other really well. So as some of you may know, maybe many of you may know, in Russia, the tradition of studies in Indian languages is a long one. It lasts for more than 200 years, we may say. Of course, there is this figure of the traveler Afanasy Nikitin, who went to India in Middle Ages and left a document, a chronicle of his travels, but he was not really a scholar. There was this iconic figure who is studied in Russia with great zeal, and in Bengal also. Maybe you heard this name, Gerasim Lebedev. He was a musician from St. Petersburg who went to India in the end of the 18th century. And he settled first in Chennai. That is a very important also important detail. He was going to Calcutta, but he landed in Chennai, and he spent, not Chennai, Madras at that time, and he spent 4 years in Madras learning an Indian language. So when he learned that he was not learning really Sanskrit, it was probably spoken Tamil, he decided that he needs to opt for a different language, and he then shifted. He also wanted to work in Calcutta and give concerts and do some projects there. So he shifted to Calcutta and started learning Bengali and Sanskrit there. But his first point of reference in India was Tamil Nadu, was Madras. Now, Gerasim Lebedev set up the first Bengali theater, the first indigenous Indian theater in Calcutta. That's one of the iconic deeds he did, and he's remembered there. He left India and returned to St. Petersburg in the beginning of the 19th century. And in 1803, he started something like a department of Indology there. He was the only person at that time. He was asking the Russian Tsar for fundings. He really needed money because he brought a lot of material with him from India. He wanted to publish, he wanted to comment. So he was partially successful. He got some sort of scholarship and he could publish some of his findings. He's credited with starting the first publishing house, with the first typography in St. Petersburg, where he could use Bengali and Devanagari scripts. So that is absolutely the first modern effort to start this dialogue between India and Russia. At the same time, we learned that in 1833, the first academic department in Sanskrit was established in St. Petersburg. At that time, there were no Russian scholars because Gerasim Lebedev had passed away by that time. So they had to invite a German Sanskritologist, Lenz, to start this tradition. And that was the first department of Indic studies in St. Petersburg University. It dates back to 1836. And after that, Department of Indian Philology was opened again in St. Petersburg University in 1858. This department is connected with a few glorious names. For example, Ivan Minaev, who traveled extensively in India. He left a collection of very beautiful, you can find this book in India because it was published a few years ago in English, the collection of Kumaoni folk tales. It was published by, I think, Namita Gokhale was facilitating this publication, and he also left his travelogues from his travels in India. He studied Buddhism and also published a lot of his diaries and notes. So that was a very big exposure of India, everyday India of the 19th century to the Russian people. At the same time, in the 19th century, in Russian, there were already translations of, for example, Kalidas's Shakuntala, or some parts from Nal and Damayanti. They were done by Russian poets using French and English translations. So mostly these were not academic translations, but made with the help of English. But still, Indian stories, Indian epic names entered the cultural space. So that was very important. There was a number of scholars of Buddhism in the late 19th century and early 20th century. There were the first scholars of Dravidian languages, the couple which were called the Mervarts. Their the husband and wife, he came from Germany, he married a Russian woman, and they together started the first Dravidology, not department really, but the first example of Tamil and Dravidian studies. They traveled a lot and brought a lot of materials. Unfortunately, they went through Stalinist repressions, and the Dravidologist Mervart was killed in the Stalin purges. So that's a very sad story. And now the new era of Indic studies came, of course, after the Second World War, starting from 1960s in St. Petersburg. The goal was set to teach modern Indian languages, mostly Hindi, Bengali, and later on Tamil was added and Telugu was added. So there were the School of Learning Indian Languages goes back to 1960 in St. Petersburg, then Leningrad, and also in Moscow. The St. Petersburg school or Leningrad school is credited with a number of great translations they made. There was a long project of publishing the whole of the Mahabharata in the Russian language. Now this project is completed. All the 18 parvas exist in the Russian language. This is the academic edition. It means that it has all the academic, all the science of an academic publisher. So this they have extensive commentaries, explanations, specific words given in with the diacritics, right? Not only in the Russian language with Russian letters, but also explained with etymological background, etc. Also, the Ramayana was published. I don't think it's published fully, but it's going to be published in the full form very soon. Ramayana took also a few decades to be published. It's a long process. I mean the Valmiki Ramayana, but there was another Ramayana published before that in 1947 or 48. I may be mistaken here. There was a great translator, Barannikov, who spent the Second World War in Tashkent, and there he was working at the Tulsidas Ramayana. And he made this translation from Awadhi into the Russian language. And this book was presented to Jawaharlal Nehru shortly after India's independence. And it is credited as one of the first Western books dedicated to India that came after the Indian independence. So it's a very, very important edition, which is very much cherished. Now, at this time, I'm speaking about St. Petersburg because it's the oldest Indological tradition. Then I will shift to Moscow and other cities. In St. Petersburg, the department, as you could understand, has been working for many years. It has the tradition of classical Indology, that students who enter this bachelor course have to study Sanskrit, and together with this, from the first year, they study Bengali or Hindi. And sometimes, instead of Bengali or Hindi, they study the Telugu language. So there is a big choice, but they usually have this classical model. That means that they always study, half of their classes are in Sanskrit and half in any modern Indian language. So that's the classical place which belongs to St. Petersburg. It is still very active, and with Madam Vice Chancellor, we were just talking about the perspective probably of opening a Telugu or Tamil chair there in St. Petersburg. That was her idea. Let's hope it might work. There was also teachers of Dravidian languages working in St. Petersburg. And now in Moscow, where I come from, we have two major lines of Indology. One is university line and another line is the purely academic line. So there is this Russian Academy of Sciences, which only does research. It does not engage in any teaching. And there are universities which develop Indology as the discipline which can be taught to students and can be practically shared. Moscow State University has the Department of Indian Philology since 1956. My father, Dr. Alexander Dubyansky, studied there starting from 1965, and he was in the first ever Tamil group opened there. And later on, he was teaching a number of groups where students came to learn Tamil. But mainly this department taught Hindi, so almost every year there is a group which teaches Hindi or Urdu and sometimes Bengali language. Dravidian languages were only Tamil was among the Dravidian languages. So in Moscow school is less classical because Sanskrit is usually not taught as a discipline which has to be compulsory. It is taught ad hoc or as special extra classes. Students could choose it when they wanted. But practical knowledge of modern Indian languages is a strong point of the so-called Moscow school, and it is developing further. Now, this year, you can realize that for Russia, India has become a very, very important point of cultural reference and political reference. It was always like this. There was a time when people looked at India as a place of cultural importance, but less so of political importance. These are the things which politicians do. On the behalf of the scholars of Indian languages and culture, I can say that the people who really do the research never thought about any political circumstances. We have always thought only about our passion towards Indian culture and always invested our time in learning languages and doing some projects connected with India, independently of if it brings any financial if it's financially somehow paying off or not. Because in the 90s and early 2000s, academic life was really difficult. Their professors didn't get much money for their job, and those who stayed in this profession stayed only because of their dedication to it. My father's example is just like that, because he was, a lot of people were going away from academia in the 90s, but some people who stayed, they remained really true to their cause of their life, I could say, because this is something they really love doing and their heart belonged to this field. So there was absolutely no way they could go away from this field and do something else, like work in a bank or in some institution which could pay off. So in the last 2-3 years, of course, India became much more important, and now we have an increase of students who want to study Indian languages. And here I would like to refer to my experience, which I had just now, because I was honored to be the delegate of this Knowledge India visitors program organized by ICCR, which just finished today in Delhi. This program was organized by, together with the government of India, with the aim of spreading the Indian knowledge systems. And a lot of foreign academics were invited so that we could share our problems, share our experience in teaching Indian languages, in dealing with Indic studies. And we learned that in many European countries, actually the situation is rather tough, because many scholars from Germany or Sweden or Baltic states told us that they are not getting any students to learn Indian languages now. So basically, a big German university with a long tradition gets 1 or 2 people who come to their bachelor courses to study Hindi or to study Sanskrit. So they were also addressing to the Indian government, saying that we also need some sort of support, because it is a shame that Indian studies are basically dying out in a lot of Western countries. And our experience in this year is a bit different. We are lucky to have the increasing numbers of students. In Moscow, altogether, Hindi and Sanskrit this year was opened in 5 or 6 academic centers, and we have about 50 students of the first year in different places. So there is a big enthusiasm towards India, and that is something which gives us hope that things will go better. Now, one thing which is, I will turn to the examples from literary studies particularly, but before that, I would just pay attention to the fact that when teaching Indian languages is still going on very well, the situation with publishing of Indian literature has been quite difficult. In the time of the Soviet Union, there was, of course, state support system which funded publishing houses and brought translators from India who could work in Moscow and who could help in translating Russian literature into Indian languages. So there was this famous Progress Publishers, that work was done towards the Indian side, but also there was a big support for translations of Indian literature into the Russian language. And we can see that maybe, of course, what was translated in the 20th century is still not enough, but we still have all the major works of, for example, Premchand translated into the Russian language. There was translations from, for example, R.K. Narayanan, who wrote in English. A lot of his books were translated. Some works by Pudumaipittan also were translated, the modern writers. Urdu and Bengali literatures were really well represented. I think that we have the full collection of Rabindranath Tagore. Of course, many of the things were translated from English, not from Bengali, but I think he's the only Indian writer who enjoys the whole range of his writings and poetry, dramas, and novels, and diaries translated into the Russian language, and things like this. But unfortunately, that stopped in the early 90s. And if I am to recall what books from India have been translated into the Russian in the last 30 years, I could only give you actually 2 examples. I'm not counting the literature of the Booker Prize winners who write in English, like Amitav Ghosh, Aravind Adhika, Arundhati Rai. These names are famous in the world. The writers of the English language, they get to the Russian reader. They are quite famous. But what we are talking about, of course, is the literature in Indian languages. In the last 30 years, I can name you probably only 2 books which were translated. One is the novel by Mridula Garg called Chitta Cobra, and another is a novel by Nila Padmanabham, Palikondapuram. And now, how these books were translated? They were translated because people who did these translations went to private publishing houses and paid their own money. So these are not anyhow supported translations. This is just entirely on the basis of enthusiasm these were done. Because one of my students worked at Mridula Garg. She made a translation together with her supervisor, and then they thought, oh, it's a nice novel, it's a nice translation, let's publish it. And no one was going to support this project. They just basically collected their own money and got the book. And Palikondapuram was published 2 years ago, and in the same way, the person who translated it was a scholar of modern Tamil literature, Dr. Zubkova. She just did it like 40 years ago, and she had this manuscript. And she said to me, like, hey, I am going to be 70 this year. I did this job many years ago. I love this novel. I have to have it published. And she sort of gave herself a birthday present like this, basically going and paying for that. And that is, of course, a shame, because our publishing houses are not, as of now, are not convinced that Indian literature from Indian languages can be interesting for the reader. It needs a lot of cultural support from the side of both of our states, because I believe that also for modern Russian literature, you also cannot have this real support, because publishers will tell you that we don't know who's going to read it. So it's kind of a very tough question. Now you may have heard that the Hindi writer Gitanjali Shri received a translation booker a year ago for her novel in Hindi, Red Samadhi, and it was translated into the English language. And that translation received a translation Booker prize. So when our publishers heard, okay, that's the Booker Prize winner, they immediately bought the rights for that book. And now my colleague is working at that translation. So that will be probably the first book which is going to be published next year after many decades, when a publisher is actually going to finance this publication. Of course, there are a lot of people who are doing, again, these translations out of enthusiasm. There are a lot of classical literature texts which are being published. That's a bit different, because a lot of publishing houses feel that when you bring Indian epic tradition, or you bring another edition of the Bhagavad Gita, that is something interesting for people who are interested in Indian religion, esoterics. But modern literature is really in this very, very precarious field, and one just feels hopeful that things will change, and we will again exchange, we will again have Russian literature more present in India, and modern Indian literature more present in the Russian language. So these are the challenges which we are facing now. However, so moving away from this literary field, I have to say that Indian mass culture is something which interests people a lot. There is a company working in modern Russia which is called Indian Films in Russia. They bring Telugu, Tamil, and Hindi movies to Russian cinemas. They work with big cities. And they try to show in the last 2 years, they try to show in the cinemas the latest film releases. And they do it so that they show it with subtitles. So that's good, because people who are interested in languages could at least listen to the original language and read the translation in subtitles. And another example would be our Russian television. We have a culture channel, and this channel bought the new version of the Ramayana TV series a few years ago, and this year they purchased this series. I don't know if someone of you heard about it. It's called Porus. It's called the most expensive Indian TV soap opera based on the invasion of Alexander the Great and his battle with or in India he was called Parvata, the ancient Indian king who faced Alexander the Great in the battle on the Beas River. So that TV series were bought by our television and are being shown just now in one of the central channels in the Russian translation. So this popular culture is moving forward, and one can only hope that in this popular culture we have like it's something which goes ahead, and behind it more serious thing could come to the market. Now, concluding about the studies of India in Russia, I would like to mention that, so I mentioned St. Petersburg, Moscow, few universities in Moscow actually. There is also Vladivostok University, it's called the Far East Federal University. They told me that they have 80 students in Pacific Studies, and they learn Chinese and Korean as the first language, but Hindi as the second. And they have a Hindi native speaker working there, so it's also a big bunch of students who are learning Hindi. We have also Hindi being taught in Kazan, and as scholars of Indian art work in some other places in Russia. So we have a number of centers. Let's hope that they will only grow. And to conclude, we have 3 major Indological conferences. One is in St. Petersburg. This conference is more than 40 years old. So for 4+ decades, it was happening every year. It is about the classical India. There is another classical conference in Moscow, which is called the Röhrig Readings. It's dedicated not to the Röhrig, the artist, but his son, who was a great scholar of Sanskrit. And my university organizes another conference, which is young, dedicated to my father's memory. And our conference is like 3 years old, but it's the only conference which has international presence. So it's the International Indological Conference we are making. So we had about 80 participants this year. So it means that academic interest towards India is there. And the last thing I would like to say that academic things are there, but there is also private interest in learning Indian languages. So now a lot of private schools are appearing which teach Hindi and Tamil. These are the 2 major languages you can learn privately from private teachers in Russia these days. So we are trying and we are doing our best. Let's hope these efforts will only grow. Now, your questions, your ideas, I will be very thankful if we actually discuss something.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to invite Professor Anjali Bandyopadhyay to deliver a concluding remarks about this.
After that, questions.
Maybe I would like to add to translation. We have participants who ask questions.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you very much for your enlightenment. Talk about the Russian universities in Russia. I would just like to say that there are various other works which have been already translated and we would not mention it. Whether you have got this translation of 10 books from Indian literature from various languages in Russian.
You mean the Sahitya? Yeah, I didn't mention, of course I know this, but I didn't mention it because I meant what the Russian publishers are doing. That is, of course, Sahitya Academy is doing this great job, but that is there, and they also were not very much promoted in the Russian market. It's only we can find them in the Indian library in the embassy.
It's there, it's there.
Yeah, it is in the library, but it's not in the
But
market.
it's
Not in the
because,
market.
It has to be.
Yes.
And it was signed by a company.
Yes, that is very sad because,
We
yeah.
tried into the Moscow books shop.
Uh-huh.
The JNU.
I never saw them there. They are not in internet. When you
Talk
heard,
is going on,
Mhm.
so that such kind of books can be available in Moscow's book.
Yes, that would be great.
Not
That would
only
be
it's,
great.
not
Yes.
like the Kami, but there are other books also which have been translated by great scholars, so they can be also available. in,
Yeah.
Moscow or Russian.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sani, for your point, and this is exactly where our collaboration is needed.
Yes.
Because sometimes we don't know something because we don't know, right? So this information exchange is extremely important. And once we know something, then we promote it between our students and things like this. Thank you for this important point, right?
Yeah, I think when now, this will Perimoda is also doing, getting, this is Perimoda is helping.
They are promoting the translation of Russian literature into Indian languages.
Indian languages, yeah, this is also an important side, right?
I would like to make a
Yes,
whatever you said about Russian, Indian books being translated into Russian, very similar to what is happening in the rest of Europe. I come from the Center for French Studies, and I have done extensive research on translation of Indian literature into French and vice versa.
yes,
And I've made almost the same observations, where, the classical books have always been translated, and a certain idea of India is being created, at least in Europe. Indian literature is known for its spirituality, exotism, like that. And this translation has been happening since the 19th century, through the 20th century, and even now, it is the old literature that is being translated.
yes, old literature is being, well, thanks to, it's good that old literature is also
No, but
being
the contemporary literature is not promoted at all.
not promoted. Yes, I know the German situation, I know the Polish situation.
And
Yes.
India has moved, and repeatedly, it's that image of India that is being repeatedly propagated.
Yes, it is either like something very spiritual, or there is a chance of being published something which really shows grave problems and shows very deep social concerns.
This is the kind of literature that is perhaps being consumed in the West. And I don't know whether to say I'm happy to know or sad to know that it's the same situation in Russia. And I am not very sure about any reception studies of translations have been carried out in Russia to find out how these books have been received.
I think the publishers know their clients, and they also use the same channels. They know that people will buy this, and this. I can give you an example of a very recent translation by Rohinton Mistry, who is a Canadian writer about Bombay. So his first novel was translated this May. It is an English novel translated into Russian. Now I look at this edition, and he focuses on the life of the Parsi community in Mumbai. And this edition, the cover of it showed Safadarjang tomb as on the cover. So it has nothing to do with the Parsi community in Mumbai, but it gives the image of India like the Taj Mahal place. And people have this connection that, okay, India means the art and dome architecture. So this is what we will buy. And in the annotation, they didn't even know, they didn't even write that this novel is about the Parsi community. They just say, oh, this is this family, they live in Mumbai and they have this kind of problem. Because the publisher made their research and they knew that if they write on Parsis, the reader is like, oh my God, this is so difficult. I don't know this foreign concept. So they try to make the life easy for the reader and make the reader, you know, like not have these expectations. They are going to read about something difficult. No, relax. You're going to
You're domesticating the
domesticating the translation. Yeah, so they make it as smooth as possible. I think they do their research. They know that people are also not ready to it for, you know, like real stuff.
No, that's a very unfortunate situation.
Yeah. But yeah. No one.
One scholar has.
No, you see that the situation is.
He was telling me that he studied doing research in Tamil.
At this moment, there are two.
I'm not ready to go
Uh,
from Moscow University.
No, not anymore. Not anymore. He has so there is one scholar. She's an independent scholar. Her name is Maria Pavlova. She publishes on Shaiva Bhakti tradition in Tamil. So she published a book, and she's doing this, but she's doing it herself. My father's close student, Dr. Nikolai Gordichuk, was in the Academy of Science, but he got an invitation to join this Tamil lexicon project in the University of Hamburg. And he shifted to Hamburg from this April. And it's a big project. It's a great project. It is for many years. There is this Professor Eva Wilden who is doing this. It's their project for really like serious for many years, but it's in Hamburg, so he left Russia, and now officially in any Russian university there is no person who officially can teach Tamil or do the research in Tamil.
So father has contributed grammar studies.
Yeah.
I asked him, why for Hindi rather than Tamil?
Oh, it is not the matter of preference. You see, in there, it is the system. When I was entering the university after my school, there was a Hindi group, and Tamil, because he was the only teacher of Tamil in Moscow University, he cannot have this group every year. So he had one group every 5 years. And he starts the group, and then he is teaching everything there for 5 years. So when I had to start my studies, Tamil group was not there. There was Hindi group, and that is why I otherwise I would have to wait for a few years. So I just entered, and so it was a technical choice, you can say. Unfortunate.
I
Yes.
have a question to Chandra. Maybe he was aware about the letter resolution from the Ministry of Education, Russia, to promote Hindi language in various universities. So, is there any effect of this letter which was issued in April 2023?
Yes.
And whether such kind of motivation letter can be possible for other Indian languages from ministry side?
Oh, could be, but the ministry has to be convinced. And I think out of other languages, Professor Bandyopadhyay, Tamil, Bengali will come on the third place, but Tamil would be number 2. And Tamil really has a good chance of being promoted as another language which should be taught in the universities, because we have 2-3 people who can teach Tamil, who can be appointed and who could be teachers. So, Tamil is possible. Yes, because this year, Tamil group Hindi group opened in this Marisa Teresa Linguistic University in Moscow. They promoted for it and they got that group. This Maxim Demchenko is doing the teaching there. So I think that is the effect of that. And another thing is that where I teach higher school of of economics, we have our classical department with Hindi and Sanskrit, but we have faculty of international relations, and they opened the Hindi group there, so we teach Hindi there also. So that is also after the effect of this letter. So something is happening. And Vladivostok, as I said, they have 80 people on the first year. So yeah, and of course, as you may know, you may have one excellent, brilliant student who learns something, but for learning something effectively, you need the environment. It is good when you have one brilliant person, but if you have the same brilliant person and 5 normal people, this brilliant person will do much better. Because without this environment, you have to have many people who are different, who interact, and out of this pool of 10, 20 people, then you will get those who do a great job. But if you have just a group of one person, this person will feel lonely, no competition, will not be inspired as much. So you need these people who learn languages. Like you also have a number of Russian students. So this generation will give you good scholars after a few years, I think.
Those students who learn the Hindi, for example, what do they do? I mean, what are the prospects for them?
That is also serious question. Some of them work in journalism, and there is a demand now for going to different events and writing about India, because very slowly people are getting it that, like they really, unfortunately, in Russia also, people were, general public, they were treating India as a third world country. But now people are slowly getting it that, it's not a third world country, it's an extremely important country with this, the biggest part of younger generation in the world. And if you look at the figures that like 500 million people are under 35 years old, and if you realize that this is a huge potential for the future, like maybe you don't have contracts today, but in 5 years from now, you will have a different situation. And we, on our behalf, also try to explain as much as possible that real business with India is not possible with English, Of course, we are speaking English here, but if people want to really understand, they have to learn local languages. They have to communicate on this personal basis. So now journalism, there are possibilities in some trade, in military connections, of course, and I think Sonoji will know better also because you are also communicating with people who are. So it's not that big an opportunities, but I think the potential is there. Because my also experience, and I always tell this at every step, that when I come to India now, I feel that people are much more ready. Of course, not the South Indians, right? But here in the Hindi belt, you feel that your people want to talk in Hindi more than they want to talk in English. And this is a change which I feel in the past years. It really happened. So in few years, people will want to communicate in Hindi and Tamil.
You can add one point, like after learning Indian language, you can become a best,
Diplomacy.
And he studied in JNU.
And in my institute, in Moscow State University, he's diplomacy. A lot of it's not only like you become a guide for tourists. No, it's much more deeper cooperation. So. Yes, please.
When saying about the research on Iran, I would like to know how do the international research in Russia is bring from the international researchers from other countries?
How it is? You mean like Indological research in Russia? How is it different from Indological other countries? Well, I think we less focus on negative image of India because there is a lot of because I dealt with German Indology and some European Indology. There, to have a successful project, I think Sanskrit studies will not be supported that much. But when you come and say, I want to research on women's rights in India, that would be supported because it would be like a project which will show, okay, we know better how equality in society functions. So we are kind of researching to tell you how you have to deal with your gender problems. In Russia, this was not much the case. We are more dealing with the classical India, with literature, with history, and less with these fashionable topics of gender equality, and which are very important topics, but they are not the main focus of the research. I think cultural studies on art and architecture, literature is not that prominent, but art, architecture, these things are there. Buddhist research is very prominent now. Philosophy, that is something to mention. Different schools of Indian philosophy, not only Advaita, but also Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya. These are the things which Russian scholars have studied quite a lot. So it's more culture oriented, I would say.
Maybe, Malone, I would like to share things about the Indology and Multilingual. Lots of research studies have been done during Soviet times and afterwards also on Indian languages.
Yeah, linguistic studies. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Books about Andronov was
Andronov, right.
Guru was teaching.
You're right.
And Chava has written
On Telugu, yeah, I think, yeah.
Telugu language and literature. And then there was Elizarenka, has written a very good book on Vedic dialogue.
Yeah, and she actually, I forgot to mention her, but Yelizarenkova is the Padma Shri awardee, and she's the translator of the Rig Veda into Russian language, of the Rig grammar. And she's a world-class, she's no more, she's the world-class scholar of Rig Veda with very big name, right?
And while studying in PFU, I worked with Professor Vinadika Professor Melika, who was my supervisor. Then, yes, I have defended my diploma, master dissertation under Professor Melika. I found that the 14 Indian scholars about under him. Now they are working in the professor. And so 14 language expert work under him. Russian, Tamil, Russian, Telugu, I have worked Russian, Telugu, other people on Malayalam, Marathi, tribalism is study of Indian languages. That work has been done. Recently, we had a kind of mailing group. Various linguists, language experts from not only from Russia or CIS countries, conference. So, collecting various research books have been done on Indian languages. So we can right now others.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this. Yes, yes. And now linguistic tradition is not that strong. It's a very bit scattered. Like there is a person who is working on Kashmiri, another person on Telugu, and some people on Kului. So it's really, really scattered. You need again a bigger school to, to give this feel that we are all doing the same work, but we are many. So,
yeah, you already mentioned Tolstoy's or Dragon was translated. I also had a chance to translate subtitles for the movies. I translated
Oh, that's good.
That was work on there was a kind of project Indian literature abroad.
Mm,
So we are thinking about that.
yeah, yeah. So this project, we should link in this project,
Yes.
definitely. At least, if not a joint project, but at least like information exchange. Yeah, thank you for mentioning this. Thank you very much.
In fact, as like the Sonu said, he mentioned,
Yeah,
I was part of the project on the SCTS.
of that.
I have translated about Telugu novel.
Yes, yes, yes,
This
yes.
was the idea was she also translated from Tamil novel into Russian.
Mhm. Great. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, then.
So, Professor Shankaran, Professor Namodaran, Dr. Dubyanskaya, your students, Mr. Bradley, very interesting and different lecture. And one thing I would like to say, and I would like to highlight, I think one of the students asked, what way Russian scholastic tradition is different from Western tradition. But I don't want to comment on the Western tradition. That's a huge thing. But to understand Russian tradition, I would like to tell you that if you read Vinay's diaries and Vinay's travelogues, you will understand how Vinay and subsequently his students and Professor Dubyansky is also part of that tradition, I must say, how he was different or his views were different from the Western scholars of that period. How he interacted with scholars in Maharashtra, in Mumbai, in Delhi, Calcutta, and Varanasi. So when Russian scholars study Tamil, so they do not study the language only, as she rightly pointed out, the culture and its extension, because Tamil is not only Tamil in Tamil Nadu, but it's how it spread in Cambodia, right? How it spread in Thailand, Indonesia. So they study that. So that I know personally. So that depth, and they learn it with love, with passion. So that is what is very distinct. So when you talk about Tamil studies, it's a huge perspective, and they try to grasp it. So they interact with scholars and interact with ordinary people. So the Russian scholars do not look at India, from European perspective, like, okay, we are superior, right? In Russian, we say, right? So that is one, but I'm not doing a competition with Western tradition, because then Professor Shova will ask so many questions, and I don't want to enter into that debate. But Russian tradition is really like, they learn India with love, with passion. And they understand, like, as Professor Damodaran mentioned, that Professor Dubyansky said, like, Tamil is different from Sanskrit. So that diversity that is there in India, the subcontinent, right? So that they understand. When they study the language, the culture, they sit here, come here, sit with us, and try to understand with humility. That is what, like, how Russian scholastic tradition is different from Western tradition. And there are big names in the Western, like Silva Levy or Max Muller or many others. I read their works, due respect, but Russian tradition is really very unique. And Professor Dubyansky is also like them. Our dear Tatiana is also part of that tradition. So definitely I believe that we should have more interactions, scholarly interactions. We should have more projects together to promote Russia in India and India in Russia.
So I said it's our joint.
Yes.
And like if you do these projects, it will definitely open up opportunities, young minds will meet, and as you rightly pointed out, that see one person, a very brilliant guy, next to Aristotle, will not help. We need a school of thought. We need a tradition. That means many students, many teachers are required. For that, more interactions. That is what I'd like to say. And I'm sure Tamil studies will grow in Russia because I visited Moscow, I visited the institution. I met very brilliant students. They have that ability. They will be able to deliver, I'm sure, in future. So that is useful. That is what we need, interaction, human interaction, and intellectual discourse. And I'm sure we will be able to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir. I would like to invite Mr. Kamal Khanna to deliver vote of confidence.
Good evening once again. Good evening. Now we have come to the conclusion of this program. First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude to our guest today, Dr. Tatiana Dubyanskaya. She came for an ICCR project. Just write a message, mail to us. Just we accepted our invitation to come to university and spending their valuable time and sharing their knowledge. Starting from translation, Russian translation, up to the contemporary Indian literary studies. You have mentioned everything in your speech. And I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Shobana Susankaran ma'am, and he's full of language, literature, and culture studies, and Professor Arvind Upadhyay sir, and professors from various departments, Ajay sir, Janani ma'am, Somu Saini sir, and all the faculty members of our Tamil Special Center for Tamil Studies, Dr. Damodaran sir and Chandrasekharan sir, and all our friends and students from various universities. I would like to express my gratitude once again. As ma'am has mentioned, we all together, we would like to continue this kind of programs and this kind of researches. Together, we will uplift the Indian studies all over the globe. Thank you so much. We will meet you in another program. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.